The invasion and war that was unleashed on the former US soil in 1960 had a brilliant start, but was soon countered in a few months. The soldiers from various countries had managed to dig deep into the enemy territory, but countermeasures from every corner made them realize they stood no chance. At various regions, evacuations were already underway. Miscommunications resulted in several divisions not getting a clear picture of the war situation as a whole, and therefore, some believed the campaign was going better than it really was. But over the passing weeks, everyone got the message to head back to the coast and retreat. The ones that were furthest away often would not make it or make a last stand, only to be blasted to bits by the incoming stormtroopers and their powerful armor. Though the initial losses felt by Emperor Palpatine were quite heavy, overall, he still had more than 5 million men stationed in the Americas. This victory gave his troops a clear morale boost, though in the coming months, they did not seem to make any intent on performing another invasion on one of the other continents. With the invasion having failed, the armies of Earth had little to do but wait again. If Palpatine would not be going anywhere, it was up to them to dictate the tempo by performing another invasion. They agreed that the next invasion would be done in 1965 in the hopes that in the coming 5 years, technological breakthroughs in weapons tech, armor, and air support could make the difference this time. A few months after the invasion of America failed, something happened that many expected to happen a lot sooner. A revolt against the communists occurred in India, where hundreds of thousands had enough of all the bloodshed and would not want to live in a world that was ruled by communist law. Demonstrations ended up in war-like scenes amongst the streets of India's biggest cities. Though those that rebelled were informed that many people in other countries thought the same way, help was left out, and they were not strong enough to oppose any threat to the ruthless reign of Khrushchev. The rebellion was short-lived, and thus humanity waited once more. Over the next 5 years, their tech and strategies did indeed change. New armor was introduced, with the T-62 and T-64 being some of the frontrunners to deal devastating damage from afar. With newly produced helicopters, infantry and supplies could be quickly deployed, being much more efficient than using paradrops. And finally, the Soviet government authorized the use of chemical warfare in the form of dropping napalm, scorching US soil, but also melting the stormtroopers within their own armor. The next war was going to be the bloodiest one yet. For the invasion of 1965, a different angle of attack was issued, as this time they invaded South America. The reason to do this was the thick jungle would be difficult to take and easy to hold. Seeing as Palpatine had most of his troops stationed across North America, it was fairly easy for multiple countries to seize large patches of land in northern South America. They quickly set up defensive posts all throughout that would be easy to defend against Palpatine's incoming forces, as most of their armor would prove useless in this terrain. The stormtroopers and other infantry actually did face this disadvantage back when they invaded this continent, but the opposing armies, like Colombia and Venezuela, were far less well equipped. As more and more armies were arriving from the east, certain divisions were tasked with creating dirt roads through the thick jungle for new tanks to arrive. The small strip of land connecting to Central America was also seen as a vital point to take hold of, as the amount of units one had in one's army did not matter in that case. More countries participated in the second invasion compared to the first one. This was partly due to the use of helicopters to quickly deploy massive amounts of units in the open field. With paradrops, the inaccuracy of the drop was still an issue, but with helicopters, there was no such thing. The northern side of the Americas was completely left alone, but that did mean that all the units here could descend onto the armies of Earth if they would head south. During the whole first month of 1965, fleet after fleet approached the South American coast, using islands like Cuba to deploy troops and supplies before being sent to the mainland. Aerial photos showcased just how massive this operation was, with thousands of ships leaving from the European, African, and Asian shores. Palpatine's army showed signs of heavy resistance down south, and Khrushchev answered with blazing fire in the form of napalm strikes. This did have one significant side effect though that worked in the favor of Palpatine. Once large patches of land had been scorched, it meant that galactic armor would have no problem traversing here. Because of this, napalm drops were only performed on areas that were already relatively open or flat. The second invasion proved a bigger success than the previous one. It had been now 3 months, and where the other armies before were beaten back by then, here the army still expanded. The amount of resistance they faced was a lot bigger though, since Palpatine was reinforced multiple times as well during the 5-year period of silence. The armies of Earth were facing almost 8 million men, meaning this war was far from over. But their grasp on South America was tight, cutting off all Imperial troops to the south from being resupplied by the northern units. But though the armies of Earth were making progress in the overall war effort, the Storm and clone troopers of Palpatine were able to penetrate through their lines on multiple occasions. Repairing those damages would cost time and manpower, slowing down the overall progress. Time was of the essence, as the units stationed up north in Central America would not be able to hold out the entire time without constant resupply and reinforcement. In fact, halfway through June, word got out that the human front line was being pushed back. Once the line would be pushed all the way back towards South America, and if it would widen, it would be too late. Millions of stormtroopers, droids, clones, and other aliens would spread like wildfire over the South American lands and obliterate the armies from various nations. And by October, it became clear that they were not able to gain that much traction within South America itself anymore. They were now once again being pushed back towards the shores on both ends. But their fight would continue. Though on all fronts they were losing, some higher-ups amongst the galactic rebels, those who either had turned from Palpatine's armies or who arrived at Earth through space as well, said that help was on the way. Since Palpatine had conquered multiple worlds before, there were many civilians from different races that had fled their homes and in the end had picked up arms to fight against Palpatine in another one of his war campaigns. These clashes had never ended well for the rebels, but organization under the many different alien species and races was not the best. But over the past years, spokesmen for the rebel cause had convinced many rebel fleets to join arms one last time and to attack the Galactic Empire in their latest galactic war campaign, the War for Planet Earth. And thus, in the year of 1965, a message came through that help had arrived. The people of Earth were told to look up towards the skies. From deep space, hundreds and thousands of ships from various alien races and species that had tasted defeat at the hands of Palpatine arrived and engaged with the galactic fleets of the Emperor that were hovering above Earth. Communications with ground teams would be scrambled as the different fleets crashed and the sky rained fire as star destroyers, frigates, and fighters from both sides. It created panic and confusion amongst those back on Earth, which was exactly what the armies of Earth needed to make the final push to enter North America once more. With the Imperial units occupied and distracted up north, the Comintern soldiers had managed to set foot in Florida for the 3rd time. It was a pattern that had repeated itself more than once, but with the skies set ablaze and air support from both their own armies and rebel fleets, victory was a more convincing concept. The rebel intel advised the armies of Earth to attack sites where Palpatine had a lot of battle droids stationed. The battle droids were some of his oldest units, used back in his earliest campaigns. They were controlled via a central control system on ships hovering high above Earth. Shooting down one of those control ships would result in thousands of droid units becoming useless, creating easy victory opportunities for the armies of Earth at hand. With backup from an unforeseen angle and human spirit high, the people of Earth were sure that this time victory was theirs.